well, welcome to Parenting on Purpose. I am Drew Zeiler, and this is Jason Bradshaw.
Hey, guys.
And today we're going to be talking about screen time during a pandemic.
Yes, and so we know that during this season there's probably a lot more screen time that's going on in all of our homes. I know it is in mine. But even though we are in the middle of a pandemic, these applications are also true just for really any season. And kind of what drove this was I was talking with Drew a couple days ago, and I had an interaction with my daughter in my own home where I sat next to her on the couch as she was playing a game on a tablet, and an ad popped up on this innocent game. It was like building your own theme park, and an ad popped up where there were two girls making out with each other. And it was just one of those things that was very alarming and very unsettling, and I was so thankful that I was there in that moment just to be able to steward that conversation in that time. And so that kind of just led us to say, hey, what can we do to be helpful to you guys as parents and as far as setting up maybe what some good boundaries might be in our home. And so we came up with three things that we think might be helpful for you as you parent your kiddos in your home. And so the first one is don't allow your kids, your students, to have their screens in their rooms or behind any closed doors for that matter. Proverbs 18:1 says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. And so just removing that temptation behind kids having screens in their own room or just behind any closed door, we think would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and so what would you say to somebody who they're like, hey, I've got software on my kid's device, and so they're good. They can go into their room by themselves. You know, what would be a rebuttal you might have for that?
Yeah, so software is great to have, and it's a good boundary, but it doesn't always work. It might work 80 to 85% of the time, but there are still ways around that.
For sure.
Also, too, when a kid brings a screen into their room, it's even though there's no one in there with them, there actually is, because there's unmonitored time, and who knows who's on the other end of that device that they could be interacting with.
Something you alluded to is oftentimes that software will stop certain websites from coming up, but there are search engines in types of ways of seeing less diabolical things that are just not helpful for kids, and you can prevent that from letting them not go behind closed doors with screens.
Yeah, for sure.
So the second question, our second point was know what they're watching and playing so that you can talk with them about it. And so what were some of the things we dialogued about there?
Yeah, so it's just so important to know what our kids are consuming, and so that we can then engage with them on the topic. And so being able to train up our child, as Proverbs say, in the way they should go. This is just really, we can't train them if we don't know what things we need to train them in. And so just being able to know and engage with them on what they're consuming on screens is just highly valuable.
I remember when I was a teacher, I think it was like Fast and Furious 5 had just come out, and all the kids were super excited about going to see it. And so I decided, hey, I'm gonna see this movie so that I can dialogue with them. I want to know what they're watching and be able to dialogue with them about it. And on Monday, I came and was visiting with some of the students, and I said to one of the students, I said, so what did you think the movie was about? Like, what was the message of the movie? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you think the movie was trying to communicate? And he didn't really know. And I said, I think that the message of that movie was that money will solve all of your problems. Yeah. And he sat back and he was like, you're right. That was the message of the movie. And I said to him, I said, David, what do you think about that? And he coming from a pretty wealthy family, was like, well, I know that is not true. And I said, the scripture actually says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And so we had this conversation, and I think it's really important that we know what our kids are watching, we know what they're playing, so that we can dialogue with them about the scripture and show them how it pans up against a biblical worldview.
Yeah, and so just a couple points on how to know what they're doing is one, just to ask them, hey, what are you watching, or what are you playing? What game are you doing right now? The second is just to sit down and do it with them. So whether they're watching a show or playing a video game, that you actually sit down and engage with that material that they're engaging with. And the third would be to check their history. And so it's not you breaking privacy. There are your kids, and you need to know. You need to search. Hey, what have they been watching on Netflix? What have they been browsing online, so that you can better engage with them about what they're doing.
And the younger they are, the more involved you need to be. And even as they get older, you still should be involved. And even though as they get older, you want to give them increased freedoms to make their own decisions, because a day is going to come when they're going to go to college and they're going to have an immense amount of freedom. And so you don't want them to go from having no freedom to one day having complete freedom.
Right.
And so even as they get older, you want to continue to give them freedoms, but still being involved in knowing what they're watching and playing, so that you can continue to have those conversations. Maybe even after they go to college, you can continue to have that relationship and engage in that kind of culture with them.
That's right. That's why we want to train them up in the way that they should go. And so,
what's the last point, Jason?
Our last point is to set limits on how much is consumed. And so the heart here is to create helpful boundaries, or we would even say expectations. And so creating expectations would help in a lot of ways. One, of even just being able to transition out of that, but then two, making sure that we are able to just kind of monitor how much our kids are consuming. So 1 Corinthians 10 talks about, hey, all things are lawful, but not all things are necessarily beneficial. But so having set time, so if it's a video game, say, hey, you can play 5 lives of that video game at 4:30. And so there's a start time, there's an end time to that, or hey, we're going to watch this movie, and after it's over, we're going to do something else as a family, or just you're going to do your schoolwork now since we're all homeschooling. But having set times and boundaries just creates expectations. That way, when we transition to the next thing, it's a little bit easier, and we don't lose track of time getting sucked into the screens and just the endless time that you could invest in there. Now, we're not saying that you set yourself up for success, so have reasonable expectations. So some of you might be working at home, or both of you might be working from home. There's more screen time going on in my house right now during this season than normal, and that's okay. But just knowing and setting expectations is super helpful.
Man, that is so helpful, and I found that to be true in my own home, that if I don't set that expectation before I implement the boundary, when I implement the boundary, it's going to create panic and frustration. But if beforehand I've said, hey, we're going to watch a show at this time, and we're only going to watch one, then whenever it's over, it usually goes over well. But if I don't set that expectation prior, we end up having
it can get a little dicey.
It gets
sure.
dicey.
Yeah,
so.
we all know that. So, we hope that this was helpful to you guys. And again, our heart behind this is just to really give you some tools to set you up for success. And so if there's any way that we can come alongside you and your families to help you guys in the season, or answer questions on this in any further way, let us know. But hey, we're praying for you, and thanks for tuning in.